have here with us Mr. Madi Jobarteh, who is the Executive Director of Edward Francis Small Center for Rights and Justice. And Mr. Jobarteh has been a promoter of human rights and development in the Gambia and abroad for over 20 years. So he has built experiences in the promotions of human rights and defense. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we call on Mr. Madi Jobarteh to join us on the podium.
Thank you, for inviting me. Let me say, I'm not a very formal person, but I think I'll try to follow the protocol a little bit, to recognize the dean and the head of department and staff here for their presence. Let me also say how glad I am that I'm sharing this forum with Mr. Juve. When I saw the program, I mean, they informed me, but I didn't see the program. And I saw the program and I saw Mr. Juve in the list, and I was like, okay, this is too heavy. People call me human rights activist. I never told anyone to call me so. But really, the person I also call an activist is Mr. Juve, because he was there from the very beginning. And so, it's an honor to share this platform with him. And I hope you have taken note of the issues he's raised, because they are very critical, important issues, particularly for young people like you, who he said are the future leaders of this country. Mr. Juve, it's a pleasure to share this forum with you. I usually don't write a speech. I take it as a limitation of my freedom, in a sense, because I just get up and just speak my mind and what comes to my mind. So, but to write a speech, I'm like, okay, now I'm confined within these lanes. So, so that's a limitation of my freedom somehow, but it's okay. But I felt I needed to write a speech for this occasion because one is a university. So I'm like, I'm gonna meet scholars, intellectuals, huh? As Dr. Fane said, it's an academic community, but also because of that as well, I felt we had to have sort of a formal conversation and something probably as SoSHSA, I don't know what the plans are, but something to leave behind to probably they would want to document and so on. So I've decided to prepare a speech. I don't know whether it fully contains all my ideas or I'll have to go beyond it or so. But let me start, first of all, to thank the association. I think you call it the Social Sciences and Humanities Association for this invitation. And when I saw 19th executive, and I was wondering, what is the term of the executive? So that you had 1, 2, 3 until the 19th. And so I was even thinking about the life of this university. Is it up to 19 years? So, just on the light side of things. But listening to comments from, Dr. Kamara, and of course what Emmanuel also highlighted, in terms of reading, I'm really concerned about that. I know they say that all the time, governments don't like to read. But, as Emmanuel said, please read. And I hope she will share all these research documents that they've had. And so, on a light note again, so I was sitting there and doctor talked about reading. And then I looked at this and I saw, I'm like, this is not the correct spelling of council. So I'm like, okay, maybe it is true, university students, SoSHSA students don't read. And SoSHSA is such that, isn't that serious? Yeah? So read. Huh? Okay. Hello? Okay. Now, hello? Don't blame me. Okay, it's all right. Calm down. Don't blame me. Don't blame me. Blame Emmanuel Juf. Because Emmanuel said, let us not normalize corruption. Let us not normalize substandard anything. So I'm not going to be here and ignore, all right, and ignore what is not normal, all right? That will be normalizing what is abnormal. So basically, that's what I mean. So you can blame him. All right. But Dr. Kamara mentioned Wisdom 3 from Fabio College. The culture he was speaking from, and I don't know what is the culture like in the University of the Gambia, but at Fabio College, you are challenged. Yes, you are challenged, not just by your course, like, in your class as a course and so on, but you are challenged as a student. I mean, student to student challenge, so that we are challenged to come out with the best at all times. And I don't want to go further, because otherwise I was going to also raise issues with the time management. I was at 8:45, and your program said 9 o'clock. Now I'm saying all of this again, as Emmanuel said, and as Doctor spoke about character. It is important, because he said something: if you cheat in class as a student, then when you become a policymaker, a politician, you will cheat in public office. And I find that, and I underline that, and I find it very, very significant, critical, because it is here we are molding, the future leaders, and so the foundation has to be right. Okay, so but let me continue to say, the creation of such societies are very important. Um, you know, and they play a very pivotal role in both academic work and social life for students. But more importantly, they're also lively and worthwhile. So if you're not a member of an association like this, please join an association like this. Not only do such associations encourage and energize students to work harder, but also they make students better in the pursuit of their academic objectives. All right, and very importantly, such associations make life on campus a memorable experience while building lasting relationships among students. So these organizations are important. Therefore, I'm very glad and humbled to be with you in your celebration of this week. We do not obtain education and knowledge, and I also refer you to the point that Mr. Juf said about what is education and what is academic performance, or so to speak. But we do not obtain education and knowledge only from inside the classroom or what our lecturers teach us. Okay? But life itself is a school. And every day is a class. And therefore, every engagement, every activity, like events happening this week, are a series of lessons from which to learn. So, Martin Luther King Jr., so we all know him, said the function of education, I quote, the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. And I'm happy Doctor highlighted a lot on character. Okay. And about character, someone said it is more important than reputation. So we hear this word reputation, my reputation. He said because your character is what you are. Your being, naturally, your nature, that's your character. And while your reputation is merely what others think you are. So others may think Madi is a very nice gentleman. But probably my character is that I'm a rascal. There's a difference between character and reputation. And so let us build character first before we talk about reputation, because we can make appear to look somehow so that people see us in a certain light. So we need men and women of character in this society, because not only is character power, but also, as noted by the 30th President of the United States, Calvin Coolidge, he said, character is the only secure foundation of the state. So we can have a strong state a strong government, strong public institutions, strong institutions in just a strong university if you don't have men and women of character. I mean, imagine your dean, your heads of department, your lecturers are not men and women of character. The students are not boys and girls of character. What kind of university is this going to be? So character is very critical. So as students, you are required to study your subjects and succeed in your exams, and you graduate and hopefully go and seek high-paying jobs. But more importantly, you are also the future leaders and decision makers, the future policy makers, technocrats, and experts who shall come to occupy the institutions of governance and development of this country. And as the leaders and experts in charge of these institutions, you will be responsible for the protection and the fulfillment of the human rights and freedoms of your people. How well you will fulfill that responsibility or not depends squarely on what kind of character you possess. Human rights are the framework within which human beings can enjoy their full dignity. Not only because dignity is inherent in us as human beings, but also because dignity is further derived and enhanced by freedom itself, by prosperity, by good health, education, security, and even hope enhances our dignity, among others. Hence, the essence of human rights is to guarantee the dignity of the human being. Now, human rights experts have said that at its most basic, the concept of human dignity is the belief that all people hold a special value that's tied solely to their humanity. It has nothing to do with their class, race, sex, religion, disabilities, or any other factor other than their being human. And I'm saying this to connect to what Mr. Juf said about hate speech, discrimination, and so on in our society. Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, otherwise called UDHR, states that all human beings are born free and equal in rights and dignity. But it is also a fact that this value or worth of human beings can be damaged, reduced, disregarded, or violated. When you torture a person, you are reducing his or her value. When a person is denied education and unable to obtain a decent job and lives in poverty, his or her dignity is affected. But also when a person is denied the right to vote, to express his or her opinion about her society, you are undermining human dignity. And in almost all cases, when we devalue fellow human beings or disregard their dignity, it is because of their status as women, as children, as old people, or due to their disability or what they are in terms of their identity, such as race, ethnicity, or religion, or their origin, among others. This is why non-discrimination and equality are fundamental elements in human rights purposely to protect human dignity. Thus, when we speak about socio-economic growth, which stems from the respect, protection, and fulfillment of social and economic rights, it takes us to the very foundations of the notion of human rights and dignity. Human rights can be divided into 5 sections: civil, political, economic, social, or cultural rights. All of these 5 areas of rights are equally important. One cannot live without the other. A violation of one affects the enjoyment of others. While these 5 pillars are interconnected, they are also contingent on certain factors and circumstances in order to be better secured or exercised or enjoyed. It is obvious that without self-determination, the rule of law and peace, human rights would be meaningless. This realization became very glaring in the very beginning, in the creation of the United Nations, following the Second World War. The preamble of the UN Charter in 1945 spoke to the need to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, referring to the First and the Second World Wars, which had brought untold suffering to the people. It went further to highlight the importance of human rights, human dignity, and the equality of men and women, as well as the equality of nations, large or small, but noting that, and I quote, that there is need to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. This is in the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Essentially, the UN Charter. Essentially, what the Charter was saying, that the protection of rights and the creation of social progress can only take place in conditions in which human rights are respected and the rule of law is followed and upheld by states. Now, 3 years after the creation of the UN, the need to still better express human rights was felt, leading to the creation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Again, in the preamble of the UDHR, it buttressed the point that the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace lies in the recognition of the inherent dignity and equality of human beings. Thus, it also went further to emphasize that the disregard of human rights led to what it calls barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind. If you recall, Mr. Diouf mentioned how doctors were experimenting on human beings just to create weapons to kill, not to mention the gassing of millions of Jews and blacks and other people in Germany at the time. Thereby, the UDHR, the preamble proclaimed that the highest aspiration of common people, of ordinary people like you and me, are to enjoy freedom of speech and belief, and freedom from fear and want. These 4 freedoms: belief, speech, expression, belief, fear, and want. And since we have NHRC and the chairman here, I think these 4 freedoms should be a topic of conversation in the Gambian society, given the challenges that they face. Freedom of belief, expression, freedom of belief, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. But the preamble also made a caveat, that if man is not to be compelled to have recourse as a last resort to rebellion against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law. Now, today is November 11th. Are we aware of that? 30 years ago, a bunch of soldiers were summarily executed, a group of soldiers, and many others. And since then, we've seen in many ways how Gambians have expressed themselves to take all kinds of measures to end dictatorship in this country, including armed struggle. Next month, December 30, would be 6 or 7 years since we had the December 30 attack. We had April 2016, Sunday led a protest. 2000, But other means, even by journalists, Data Hydra and so on, sought to confront dictatorship. So that the UDHR is saying, if man is not to be, and woman, compelled to resort to violence, that human rights should be protected, and protected by law. And this is significant for you people to realize, we'll come to see. So I'm making these points to show that the UN Charter or the UDHR, which are the foundations of the international human rights system, have abundantly recognized that the protection and fulfillment of human rights is the basis for not only freedom and peace, but also for the enjoyment of social and economic rights and well-being. Now, stemming from the UN Charter and the UDHR, the UN General Assembly went further to create 2 significant treaties. One is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, otherwise called ICCPR, and the other is the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights in 1966. The Gambia ratified these instruments in 1979. Okay. These 2 instruments have further expanded on the UDHR, thereby laying out a full scope of civil and political rights on one hand, and on the other hand, economic, social, and cultural rights. The need to create the enabling environment for the protection of rights has been further captured in the preamble of the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which states that recognizing that in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the ideal of freedom or free human beings enjoying freedom from fear and want can only be achieved if conditions are created whereby everyone may enjoy his or her economic, social, and cultural rights as well as his or her civil and political rights. Now, the question is, what are these conditions that these laws, international laws, refer to? Now, the answer is provided in Article 1 of the Covenant itself, which states that Article 1, all peoples have the right to self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. One can notice in that article, it opened with the notion of self-determination. So the question is, what is self-determination? The Australian Human Rights Commission states that self-determination, in a practical sense, means that we have the freedom to live well, to determine what it means to live well, and according to our own values and beliefs. That is self-determination. So in other words, self-determination is one's ability to make choices, to set goals, and to take action to achieve them on your own. The reference to self-determination was significant at the time because in 1945, almost half of the world, or more than that, were under colonialism or apartheid or occupation or domination, mainly by Western nations themselves. Thus, in essence, the UN and this covenant are making the point that freedom from fear and want cannot be guaranteed under conditions of foreign domination. Now, the second part of the article states that by virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. This clearly shows that it is imperative, first and foremost, if people are to enjoy social and economic rights and well-being, that they choose for themselves, as a matter of self-determination, a political system through which they can freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. The freedom to choose is either absent or severely limited if one is under control, occupation, or domination of another entity. Imagine the Gambia during colonialism. At that time, most Gambians lacked basic social services and viable economic opportunities because the governors of our society at the time were not Gambians. Poverty, diseases, deprivation, and lack of political representation and civil liberties were the order of the day during that period. It was for this reason that Edward Francis Small, mentioned by Dr. Fane, was shouting no taxation without representation 100 years ago, as he agitated for workers' rights and ensuring that farmers have fair price for their produce, and the government was responsive to the social and the economic needs of the people. So long as the people cannot elect their representatives to the decision-making table, they cannot determine, therefore, how their resources are to be utilized, who manages their taxes, and where those taxes should be invested in. Hence, it will be difficult for them to determine nor enjoy, even enjoy, goods and services that would guarantee them economic and social development. For this reason, the enjoyment of human rights cannot be fully guaranteed when a nation is, can only be fully guaranteed when a nation is independent and democratic, so that people can freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. So in essence, the conditions that the UN Charter, the UDHR, and its two covenants consider as necessary for the protection of rights should be a society which is independent and democratic with the necessary laws to guarantee rights and institutions in place to protect and fulfill those rights. Under these conditions, citizens also have the freedom to exercise their rights that are stipulated in the laws without fear of reprisal. But let me also say that the government alone, on its own, cannot guarantee social and economic rights in full, even though they bear primary duty in the protection and fulfillment of these rights. This is because, apart from capacity challenges, there is the incidence of corruption, abuse of office, and sheer negligence by public institutions and officials. Hence, the enjoyment of economic and social rights, as well as all human rights, also heavily rests on the willingness and ability of citizens to freely and openly participate and influence law and policy-making processes, and to monitor and hold accountable the state and its agencies. It is for this reason that not only self-determination is indispensable, but also a democratic governance system is a necessity in promoting and protecting and fulfilling these rights. So when we talk about economic and social rights, what are we talking about? They are about our rights to employment, social security, or access to housing, food, to water, electricity, healthcare, and education, and others. They are also about fair wages and equal pay for men and women, as well as having adequate protection of income in the event of unemployment, sickness, or old age. To achieve these rights, the covenant also guarantees the right of workers to form or join trade unions, to strike, and engage in collective bargaining. Above all, socio-economic rights are about having the right to an adequate or the highest attainable standard of living. Now, these rights one would find to be fully expressed in the Gambia Constitution and other laws of the Gambia, in most cases. Now, these rights do not come by themselves. They must be provided by duty bearers and as well as demanded by citizens. So governments should provide these rights, but citizens also demand them. Duty bearers, whether they are government or businesses or other entities, so long as one provides goods and services, these goods and services must be of quality, value for money, accessible and affordable to all. The covenant has set out a whole set of obligations to ensure that economic, social, and cultural rights are met. In fulfillment of these obligations, the covenant provides a clear language, or in clear language, a set of steps, standards, and targets for states to take, given the unique nature of social and economic rights. In other words, the provision of these rights is capital intensive. Imagine how much cost has to go into this campus, building this campus as part of the right to education. It's time consuming because it will take time to build something like this. It requires immense technical capacity, all right, to design for the, to recruit and so on, and which is a never-ending exercise because we will always have more students to come to this university, which will continue to operate and expensive to continue to operate because electricity, water, and other services. So, for that matter, international law and Gambian law provides that in providing social and economic rights, that the government takes all necessary appropriate means to adopt appropriate policies, to adopt appropriate legislations, to undertake administrative and other measures to make sure, including budgetary measures, financial measures, to make sure these services, these goods are available. And to ensure all efforts are made to utilize the maximum resources available to guarantee them. So that when you look at our constitution, you will find it echoing the language of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. For example, when you look at section 30 of the Constitution, which is about the right to education, which says all persons have the right to equal educational opportunities and facilities, and with a view to achieving the full realization of this right. And one would see in section 30A, B, and C how, for example, basic education should be free, compulsory, and available to all, but how secondary and tertiary education should be provided in a way that generally it will be made available and free to everyone. This is way back in 1997 when it was stated in the Constitution. So that the question arises, have we achieved free basic education, secondary and tertiary education in the Gambia yet? And what about other socio-economic rights, such as right to health, right to housing, right to employment, right to water, electricity, social protection, right to food, and so on? Now, you will find that these rights, unfortunately, are not covered in the Gambia Constitution. And by international law, rights that are not stipulated in the law, particularly in the Constitution, are not rights that citizens can claim, that government has an obligation to deliver, to provide. So to demand and obtain these social and economic goods and services require the freedom of citizens to demand them, but even to choose. That citizens have a right to buy or even to boycott goods and services. That as well as freedom to question or to engage in litigation, to go to court, to even protest, and as well to expose poor quality goods and services, as well as unethical practices by service providers. Now, these are all rights that relate to social economic rights, but rights being sought using civil and political means, the exercise of civil and political rights. And that indicates how civil and political rights, freedom of expression, freedom of the media, freedom of assembly, and so on, are tools that can be used to demand social and economic rights, right to food, right to education, and so on. And to demand not only their provision, but to ensure that they are of quality and affordable and accessible to all. So that the purpose of independence, we cannot talk about human rights without independence, because it is only within the framework of independence, self-determination, that we can guarantee our full rights. So that the purpose of independence, therefore, is to make sure we enjoy our civil, political, economic, and social rights in full. These rights that we enjoy today were not available to Gambians during the period of colonialism. There was no UTG. And that was why we sought self-determination, that we sought independence. But it is to highlight, when we discuss social and economic rights, a very pertinent theme at a very pertinent point in our history at this time, to look at the facts on the ground. And as I said at the beginning, given that we are students of social sciences, to pay attention to the situation of social and economic rights and well-being in this country. So that since independence, 60 years ago, what is evident is that the economic and the social rights and well-being of Gambians have been dire, very challenging, very difficult. And again, this is not my opinion. Let us look at what the government itself is saying. The Gambia Bureau of Statistics, in its Integrated Household Survey 2020, the last one they held, reports that, I quote, the largest proportion of households experiencing food insecurity across regions and are food poor, food poverty, are found in Kuntaur as an administrative region. 79.1% of households are food poor. Karawan, 73.7% are food poor. Basse, 68.7% are food poor. Masakonko, 62.6% are food poor. Brikama, 61.8% food poor. Janjambure, 60.8% food poor. Katifing, 33.9% food poor. Banjul, 14.8% food poor. Indicating that of all the 7 administrative regions, except Kanifing and Banjul, all the rest, half of the population live in food poverty. That's fundamental that we need to bear in mind. Secondly, according to the National Development Plan, currently in place, 2023 to 2027, limited access to health facilities has been identified as a national weakness. while noting that youth unemployment stands at 38.6%, and national unemployment rate stands at 31.6%. National poverty rate stands at 53.4%. Now, recall what Mr. Juve was talking about, socio-economic growth in terms of human development and the indicators. But why this is the case, the fact is the Gambia has several laws, policies, in fact beautiful policies, and institutions, as well as several multi-million-dollar projects purposely to generate socio-economic development and prosperity. And to illustrate this point, I want to highlight a few of those projects from 2017 to date. One, the World Bank currently is providing $40 million for the Gambia Inclusive and Rice and Resilient Agricultural Value Chain Development project called GIRAF, as well as providing $92.71 million for the Gambia Resilient Inclusive Skills and Equity project called RISE, the RISE project. Two, the African Development Bank is providing $102 million for the Trans-Gambia Corridor project, road construction. Number three, the EU is providing 9 million euros for the Responsive and Accountable Democratic Transition project. So the transitional program is being funded by the EU. Number four, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, is providing $80 million for the resilience of organizations for transformative smallholder agricultural project, which is called ROOTS, the ROOTS project. Number five, the Islamic Development Bank and the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation are jointly providing $250 million in support of key economic sectors, agriculture, energy, health, and the private sector. And finally, there is also the Murabaha financing agreements. It's an Islamic financing arrangement at a tune of $55 million to support agriculture and energy sectors. So this was a few of the projects from 2017 to date, which are loans and grants to the Gambia, costing over billions of dollars, if you translate all this into dollars. So that, coupled with the millions of dollars in taxes, we recall that the GRA currently collects nothing less than $1 billion per month. And that's just one source of revenue. Still, socio-economic conditions remain challenging, that the presence of poverty, deprivation, diseases, unemployment, poor utility services, and high cost of living remain perennial and widespread, resulting in the rise of the backway phenomenon. Prostitution, crime, drugs abuse, inequality, and dependency. So what these scenarios mean for the Gambia is that they question, on the one hand, the commitment of the government to protect and fulfill economic and social rights, and on the other hand, the willingness and commitment of Gambians themselves as individuals, communities, and groups in exercising their rights to participate, influence, monitor, and hold the state accountable to make sure it fulfills its obligations to social and economic rights. I know our politicians, policymakers, and intellectuals like to say that the Gambia is a poor country. That's a very common saying. The Gambia is a poor country, as they try to explain or even justify these poor socio-economic conditions. But I always wonder what they mean by that. Is it that poverty is our nature and ordained on us by God? Is it that the country is a barren land? Or is it that our people are helpless and totally incapacitated? Or is it that the government does not receive taxes, loans, and grants? Or is it that the Gambia has no potential, no opportunities, no options whatsoever or that the Gambia is still under foreign domination or colonialism. Trying to understand what they mean by the Gambia is a poor country. So that after 60 years, it raises the question, therefore, if for 60 years we are still considered poor country, how many more years will it take for us to be still considered poor country or to be called now a wealthy country? Another 60 years? Another 50 years? So in conclusion, I leave these questions with you as social science students to ponder over. All right? What I know, this country, the longest distance is 400 kilometers. You know, the widest distance is 80 kilometers. The land is flat, no mountains, all right, no natural obstacles, and fertile. The weather provides for 365 years of farming. Everything grows all throughout the year. It has a river that cuts across in the middle of the river, in the middle of the country, which never runs dry, and, you know, with a lot of fresh water. Water that is so rich in resources, and we have an ocean. Not to mention our sunlight and wind. So that when I look at the Gambia, for me, Gambia is very wealthy. It's a very rich country. So maybe the minds of the policymakers are poor, but the Gambia is not poor. So students, think about it. Ultimately, it is you who will graduate and become the politicians, the leaders, the policymakers, the technocrats, and the experts of our society. From a human rights perspective, though, poverty is injustice. Poverty is injustice. And given all the factors, there's no justification why one Gambian should be poor. Why a Gambian should feel so hopeless in the Gambia that you would think to cross the high seas or the Sahara Desert is the only way out. That a Gambian mother should die giving birth to a Gambian in a Gambian hospital. That should not be. So the fact that these things happen is an indication of injustice. Therefore, how you will define, interrogate, research, and study your country to identify the challenges and come up with solutions and guarantee economic and social rights depends on not only what you read and understand as a student in this school, but very importantly, on the character that you possess. That you don't become another African intellectual who has benefited from the resources of the people. This university came from the resources of our people. Those women you buy groundnuts at the place, you buy mburo nyebe, they contributed to this. All right? Those boys pushing push at Brikama market, all right? Those farmers across, far here, you see farmers in there, they contributed to this. Not to mention your parents and the rest of the Gambia. So you are enjoying this cozy environment. Some of those people, in fact, most of them never entered a beautiful room like this in their entire life. They've never enjoyed an AC. But you enjoy all of that, and then you graduate, and now become a leader of the people, a policy maker, a president, a minister. Emmanuel said the president could be out of this place, a minister, a parliamentarian, a judge, a director, whatever. And instead of securing the rights of your people, utilizing their resources to invest back in them, you rather want to buy one vehicle for $12 million to transport you from Brusubi to Banjul, from Brikama to Banjul, passing by those women selling Gertesaf on the way that you were buying from when you were a student. That is the ungratefulness of the African intellectual. And I hope you are not going to be a bunch of ingrates who would suck the blood, the resources, because literally they are sucking the blood and the sweat of our people and graduate, and we put up a grandiose ceremony here for your graduation ceremony, and now you have become the minister or the president, and all you do is to consume from the people like a parasite. The tragedy, the biggest obstacle of the African, of the Gambian, is the Gambian intellectual. Don't be that kind of intellectual. Yeah? So I thank you for your kind attention, and I hope many more Edward Francis Small are among you. Thank you.